He walked into his father's cafe and barely recognized it. The floors were sticky, the baristas were rude, and the community his dad once built? Gone. So he did what no one expected. The CEO of a national coffee chain shaved his beard, ditched the suit and went undercover to expose what really happened inside store number 4. But what he found wasn't just bad service, it was rot. And one quiet girl who refused to let it win. This isn't just about coffee. It's about leadership. Second chances and the moment a forgotten store came back to life. What the hell happened here? Grant Ellison stared out from behind the windshield of his rental car, parked just across the street from the flagship cafe that once carried his father's name like a badge of honor. Once, there had been a line wrapping the block every Saturday morning. Now he saw a flicker of movement through the dusty front window. 2 customers walking out, one shaking her head, the other checking her watch in frustration. This place was supposed to be different, a sanctuary in a city that never paused. But now, something was broken. Grant adjusted the bill of his cap, tugged the hood of his sweatshirt forward, and stepped into the cold. It had been over a year since he'd last set foot in this location, since his father died, since Grant had become the reluctant CEO of Ellison Roasters, managing from a distance, buried in quarterly reviews and boardroom chatter. He hadn't planned to return like this, unshaven, unrecognized, undercover. But when reports started piling up, rude staff, bad coffee, slipping numbers, he knew spreadsheets wouldn't tell him what was really wrong. So today, he'd walked away from the office, from the titles, from the meetings. Today, he was just another tired guy in line for coffee. But what he was about to uncover wouldn't just change the store. It would change everything. Grant Ellison had grown up with the scent of fresh roasted beans clinging to his clothes. As a kid, he'd sit on the counter of the original Ellison Roasters Cafe, back when it was just a single shop tucked into a corner of downtown Portland, watching his father charm customers and steam milk like it was performance art. That cafe wasn't just a business. It was a heartbeat. It pulsed with laughter, conversation, and purpose. Grant learned everything from the floor up. How to tamp espresso, how to read a regular's mood from the way they walked in, how to stay after hours, fixing broken chairs, and wiping tables not because anyone asked, but because his dad always said, "You respect the counter, it'll respect you back." When the company expanded, Grant stayed close to the ground. Even as new stores opened and investor meetings became more frequent, he kept working shifts, visiting locations, and calling staff by name. But everything shifted the day his father passed. Suddenly, Grant was no longer just the founder's son or the head of store development. He became CEO. Boardrooms replaced brew bars. Investor calls replaced customer conversations. At first, he tried to keep up the personal touches, but the company grew faster than his time could stretch, and slowly, the distance widened. He remembered the moment he realized how far removed he'd become. It was during a quarterly review. One of his executives praised how well Store 4 was performing. But when he pulled up the store's Google reviews later that night, the truth hit like a punch to the ribs. Rude staff, undercooked pastries. Barista rolled her eyes at me. "This place has changed, and not in a good way." He forwarded the reviews to Miles, the district manager. Miles responded with an upbeat email about staffing shortages and adjustment periods. It sounded rehearsed, but what really unsettled Grant was how casual the excuses were, like decline was just something to shrug at. He knew his father would have shown up the next day, apron in hand, ready to ask hard questions. That's when the decision crystallized. He'd go back, not as the CEO, not as the name on the company letterhead, but as a nobody, an invisible observer. If the culture had truly rotted from the inside, then he couldn't fix it from behind a desk. So he grew out his beard, wore secondhand sneakers, borrowed his cousin's old college ID for cover. He picked the name Cal, short, forgettable, and signed himself up as a new part-time hire at Store 4. No press, no heads up, no favors. Just one man walking back into the empire his father built. to find out if it was still standing, or if it needed to be torn down and rebuilt. The back entrance of Store 4 creaked like a tired door that hadn't been oiled in years. Cal, that was what the name tag said now, stepped inside quietly, his hoodie still damp from the misty morning. Drizzle. The air smelled faintly of burnt espresso and lemon disinfectant. The staff room was cramped, 2 metal lockers, a broken clock, and a folding chair with one leg shorter than the rest. No one looked up when he entered. A girl in her 20s sat scrolling through her phone, earbuds in, legs propped on a milk crate. Another leaned against the wall, smacking gum between her teeth, apron half-tied. They barely acknowledged him when he mumbled, "Hey, I'm new, first shift." Someone pointed toward the time clock. No smile, no welcome. Grant had expected some friction, but the level of indifference was unsettling. This wasn't just a rough crew, this was apathy polished into habit. He clocked in and followed the muted clatter of plates and voices out to the main floor. The store looked different than he remembered. Dimmer, the display case had a smudge across the glass. One of the espresso machines hissed unevenly, the steam wand squealing like it hadn't been cleaned properly. A few customers sat in silence, eyes glued to their phones, not one chatting with a barista or being greeted by name. Behind the counter stood a young man, tall, thin, buzzed hair, calling out orders like it was a punishment. Grant noticed the name tag, Jace. He barked instructions to someone in the back without looking. The female barista chewing gum slid over. Her name tag read, Taryn. She looked him up and down like she was sizing up a broken appliance. "You're the new guy?" "Yeah, Cal. First day." She rolled her eyes. "Great. Dishes and restock. Don't touch the register." "Got it," Grant said evenly. He moved toward the back, pulling on his apron. No one offered to show him around. No one even bothered to fake interest, and for the first time the full weight of what he'd walked into began to settle. This wasn't just mismanagement. It was cultural erosion, and he was standing right in the middle of it. The first hour passed in a blur of sticky pitchers, lukewarm water, and instructions barked over shoulder glances. Grant, Cal, kept his head down, rinsing cups and stacking trays like a man with something to prove. The sink smelled of sour milk. The drain board wobbled every time he set something down. He noticed Ava, the quiet girl from earlier, moving efficiently around the bar, restocking syrups and aligning pastry labels. No wasted motion, no small talk. But it was Taryn and Jace who made the most noise, and not the helpful kind. Around 9:40, as the rush thinned and the last few mobile orders trickled out, Grant slipped into the hallway near the employee break room, pretending to check the mop bucket. He didn't have to strain to hear them. "Honestly," Taryn's voice rang clear, "if one more idiot asks for oat milk, I swear I'm gonna dump half and half in and call it a day." Jace laughed, a low, cocky snort. "You should have seen what I did to some Yelp Karen last week. Complained about her cappuccino being too foamy. Like that's literally the point. I told her to Google it." Grant froze, one hand still on the mop handle. The tone wasn't frustration, it was contempt. And worse, comfort. Like they'd been doing this for a while. Taryn again. "This place is a joke. We're understaffed. Underpaid and untouchable. They'll never fire us. No one wants this job. We run this place now." There was silence, then Jace added, "Told Miles the new girl's a drag. She's too slow. Told him if she doesn't pick up the pace, we should slash her hours." Grant's grip tightened. Miles knew? Or at least, didn't question it. He stepped back into the dish area just in time to see Ava quietly wiping down the syrup bottles, shoulders slightly hunched. Taryn breezed past without saying a word, then shoved a crate under the counter with her foot. "Hey," Grant said, keeping his voice low as he handed Ava a clean cloth. "You're doing good." She glanced up, surprised. "Thanks." A pause. "They usually don't talk to me." Grant nodded, forcing a neutral expression. "They talk enough when they think no one's listening." Ava looked back down, as if deciding whether to respond. She didn't. At that moment, Jace strode out from the hallway, his eyes catching Grant near the register. "Dish guy," he barked. "Mop bucket's full." Dump it by the dumpster out back. Grant frowned. You don't have a mop sink? Taryn chimed in, chewing gum loudly. Nah, just toss it. No one cares. Health code violations, staff trash-talking customers, sabotaging new hires, and a manager who let the wolves run the pack. This wasn't just a few bad attitudes. It was structural, decay, and it had Grant Ellison's family name printed on every cup. By the time the lunch rush hit, Grant had learned 3 things about Ava Kim. 1. She moved like someone used to cleaning up other people's messes. 2. She apologized too often for things that weren't her fault. And 3. She never stopped, trying even when no one noticed. She wasn't flashy, didn't complain, didn't gossip. While Jace barked orders and Taryn glared at customers who dared ask for substitutions, Ava simply worked. She prepped pastry trays with quiet precision, double-checked labels, wiped counters no one asked her to. When the espresso machine sputtered mid-order, she stepped in to manually steam milk without flinching. But what stuck with Grant most was how invisible she seemed. When a woman at the counter snapped, "I said almond milk, not soy," it was Ava who took the brunt of it. She offered to remake the drink even though she hadn't been the one to make it in the first place. Jace snatched the cup from her hand and dumped it with a theatrical sigh. "She's still in training," he told the customer with a smirk. Ava's hands trembled slightly as she started again. Later, as Grant wiped down the prep sink, he caught her alone at the register. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Just trying not to mess up." "You didn't mess up." Her eyes flicked up to meet his. Tired. Guarded. "You don't know them yet." Before he could respond, Jace called out from behind the bar. "Cal, you want to be useful? Mop water's still sitting there. Dump it before someone slips." Grant clenched his jaw. He walked past Ava, muttering, "This place deserves better." She didn't reply, but something in her posture shifted. Outside, as he poured the reeking mop bucket near the dumpster, Grant spotted the telltale stains of weeks-old spills. Layers of neglect, literal and metaphorical, staining the ground. That night, after clocking out, he didn't head straight to his hotel. He waited. At 7:02 p.m., Ava exited the back door, coat pulled tight around her, a backpack slung over one shoulder. She walked like someone who had learned not to expect anything kind at the end of a shift. "Hey," Grant said gently, stepping into her path. She startled, then relaxed slightly. "Oh, Cal, right? Yeah. I know it's late, but could I buy you a tea or something? No strings, just want to talk." She looked at him for a long moment. Then quietly she said, "Okay. There's a library cafe a block over. It's quiet." As they started walking, Grant glanced sideways at her. He didn't know yet what Ava had been through, but he could feel it. Beneath the surface, behind every "I'm fine," there was more. And tomorrow, he was going to hear all of it. The library cafe was almost empty, save for 2 students murmuring over textbooks and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. Ava chose a seat near the window, back to the wall. A habit, Grant noticed, one eye always on the door. He set a paper cup in front of her. Chamomile. Figured it was a safe bet. She offered a tired smile, wrapping her hands around the warmth. "Thanks." They sat in silence for a beat. Then, she asked, "So, what is this?" Grant took a slow breath. "Time to pull off the mask." "My name's not Cal," he said. "It's Grant. Grant Ellison." Her brow furrowed. "As in Ellison Roasters?" He nodded. Ava leaned back, blinking. "Wait, you're the owner?" "CEO," he corrected softly. "But yeah, that cafe you've been holding together, it's mine." She stared at him, processing, then looked away, tension tightening across her shoulders. "You're not in trouble," he added quickly. "You're the reason I'm sitting here." She didn't speak. "I needed to see it myself," Grant said. "The reports didn't add up. Corporate said things were fine, but what I saw today..." He shook his head. "That's not the company my father built. Ava's voice was quiet when it finally came. I almost quit last week. Grant looked up. She was staring into her tea. I'm a full-time student, she continued. This job was supposed to be temporary, but I need the paycheck. I keep telling myself just one more week, just until exams are over. But, she stopped. But what? They make you feel like you're the problem. Jace told me on my second shift, that I was replaceable. I thought he was joking. Then Taryn started cutting me out of tasks, telling me to watch and learn, then blaming me when customers complained. Grant's stomach churned. No one trains anyone, she said, voice flat now. They just throw you into the rush and act annoyed when you fall behind. And if you ask questions, you're slowing things down. Has management ever checked in? A dry laugh. Miles showed up once. 10 minutes. Said we were finding our rhythm. Jay stood right next to me the whole time. Grant opened a folder from his bag and slid it across the table. Staffing schedules, shift reports. We've been short 2 people every morning for the last month, he said. Jay submits the schedules. Miles approves them without review. Ava stared at the pages. So they're just doing whatever they want. Not anymore, Grant said. She looked up slowly. What are you going to do? We're closing the store for 3 days, clean reset, retraining, new systems. Her eyes widened. You're shutting it down? It's the only way to fix this, right? A pause, then, what about me? You? Grant smiled. You've already earned your place. By sunrise the next morning, Store 4 didn't smell like burnt espresso anymore. It smelled like bleach, lemon polish, and fresh determination. A large, closed for internal training sign hung on the front door. Through the windows, curious passers-by watched a temporary crew unload crates of cleaning supplies and brand new shelving units. The battered pastry case was being dismantled. The espresso machine was being descaled by a tech in a branded jumpsuit. Years of neglect were being scrubbed off one surface at a time. Grant stood inside, arms crossed, dressed in a charcoal blazer and fitted jeans. The beard was trimmed. The glasses were gone. He didn't look like Cal anymore. Across the room, Ava stood with a clipboard in hand, scanning inventory checklists with sharp focus. Her apron was clean, hair pulled back tightly. She didn't stall. She didn't fidget. She just moved. Direct, efficient, alert. Grant approached her. Oat milk didn't arrive, she said without looking up. I flagged it with the Tempe lead, but it's not on the manifest. We'll reroute a case from the Midtown store, he replied. You good to walk the team through sanitation protocol? She hesitated. Depends who shows up. At exactly 7:30, the front door opened. Taryn stepped in first. She froze when she saw the reorganized counters, the corporate crew wiping down every inch of stainless steel, the clipboard in Ava's hands. And then, she saw Grant. Her jaw dropped, slightly. Wait, you're... Yes, Grant said calmly. I'm the owner. Taryn blinked. No one told us. No one was supposed to. She looked around, uneasy. So, are we fired? You're still on payroll. But this is a clean slate. Everyone gets a choice. Go through retraining or walk away. No hard feelings. But moving forward, there are standards. Real ones. She didn't reply. Just nodded stiffly and slipped into the back. At 7:45, Jace showed up. He didn't come inside right away, just stood by the window watching. When he did enter, he walked straight past Grant without eye contact and headed toward Ava. What is this? He asked under his breath. Grant stepped in between. It's called accountability. You can't just... I can. I own the company. And what I saw yesterday? Grant's voice didn't rise. That ends now. Jace scoffed. You got all that from one shift? I got it from your behavior, from falsified time logs, from watching you undermine your own team. So, what, I'm out? You'll be compensated for the last 2 weeks, but as of now your access is revoked. You're not part of this rebuild. There was a pause. Jace stared at him, a bitter laugh escaping. Unbelievable. Then he left. No apology, no look back. Grant exhaled slowly. Behind him, Ava said nothing. But, As she turned back to the checklist, there was something new in her shoulders. Not tension, purpose. The store felt still, not quiet, but purposeful, focused. Like everyone inside was holding their breath between the old world ending and something new beginning. Grant stayed mostly in the background that morning. He watched as Ava gave the remaining team a walkthrough of updated sanitation protocols, how every cleaning checklist was now logged digitally, how every shift had a designated opener and closer with accountability. She didn't speak loudly, but her words carried weight. Then, at 10:12 a.m., the door creaked open again. Jace, back in the same hoodie from yesterday. He walked in slower this time. No smirk, just silence. He scanned the room. Fresh supplies. A new mop sink installed near the back hallway. Schedules pinned to the wall. A whiteboard with shift roles and new training modules. Then he saw Ava. "You told him everything," he said, voice low. She didn't flinch. "I didn't have to." Grant stepped forward, calm, direct. "You're not supposed to be here." Jace looked at him, jaw tight. "I gave this place 4 years. And in the last 6 months," Grant said evenly, "you've cut corners, manipulated schedules, and turned away more customers than I can count." Jace's eyes flashed. We're doing the best we could. You pull hours, pull staff, and expect miracles. You created this mess." "No," Grant replied. "I stopped watching. That's on me. But what you did, that was a choice." Silence. Everyone had stopped working now. Even Taryn, wiping down the espresso machine, stood frozen. Jace took a slow step forward. "You think you're going to fix this with a new mop and some checklists?" "No," Grant said. "I'm going to fix it by starting with the people, by removing those who poison the culture." "And what? Make her a manager?" He scoffed, nodding toward Ava. "She's a kid. She folds if a customer breathes too hard." "She stood tall when you were tearing people down," Grant said, voice firm. "She didn't fold, you did. You just made it look like confidence." Jace's mouth twitched, a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're fired," Grant said finally. "Effective immediately." A beat passed. Jace looked around. At Ava. At the crew. At the gleaming new workspace. Like he didn't recognize it anymore. Then, with a short, bitter laugh, he turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. Silence held for a moment longer. Then Taryn cleared her throat. "I didn't know he was doing all that," she said quietly. "I just thought he had authority." Grant turned to her. "No one has authority without accountability. If you're staying, that's the new rule." She looked down, then nodded. "I'll stay." And just like that, the weight in the room shifted. Not entirely. Not yet. But it was the first crack in the old foundation, and sunlight was starting to come through. By the second afternoon of retraining, something remarkable had started to happen. People were listening to Ava. Not because she raised her voice. She didn't. Not because she bossed anyone around. She wouldn't. But because she understood the chaos they'd all been surviving in. And showed them there was another way. Theo, a quiet part-timer who used to fade into the background, began asking her questions about grinder calibration. Taryn, still guarded but present, started double-checking her work without being asked. Even the temp workers from corporate deferred to Ava when they weren't sure where something belonged. It wasn't flashy leadership. It was quiet gravity. Grant watched from the sidelines, notebook in hand, resisting the urge to intervene. He didn't need to. Ava held the space like someone who'd finally been allowed to stand up straight. At 4 p.m., the group gathered near the espresso bar for a hands-on exercise. Ava walked them through order flow, how to balance mobile tickets with in-store orders, how to communicate clearly without shouting, how to handle corrections without embarrassment. Taryn raised a hand. "What if someone's just difficult, like rude for no reason?" Ava paused. "Then we stay calm. Fix what we can. And don't take it home with us." She didn't look at Grant, but he smiled all the same. After the session ended, she found him near the back hallway. "You were right," she said, "about how this doesn't change overnight. But you're starting it," he replied, "and they're following you." She hesitated, unsure whether to believe that. Grant handed her a copy of the updated scheduling system. "You're officially in charge of writing next week's shift calendar. You'll have full oversight, senior trainer access. I want you in the store meetings. Input, decisions, all of it." Her eyes widened. "Wait, I'm actually acting shift supervisor," he confirmed, "and not just in title." Ava's lips parted like she wanted to say something, then stopped. She simply nodded slowly, like her mind was still catching up. "Why me?" she asked after a beat. Grant answered without hesitation. "Because you never looked away. When things got hard, you didn't check out. You leaned in." She nodded, again. "Okay, I'll do my best." "I don't want perfect," Grant said. "I want honest, accountable, and consistent." "You'll get that," she said quietly. By 6 p.m., she was walking Taryn through the new beverage inventory system, pointing out supplier codes and tracking sheets. There was no trace of the girl who used to whisper apologies behind the counter. She wasn't trying to survive the shift anymore. She was shaping it, and Grant knew, without a doubt, that the rebuild had already begun. Rebuilding a cafe wasn't just about new countertops or gleaming espresso machines. It was about changing the rhythm, and now, for the first time in a long time, Store 4 had one worth keeping. By midweek, the laminated shift standards chart hung on the break room wall. A rotating lunch schedule was posted next to it, color-coded and spaced to prevent coverage gaps. Grant noticed staff actually reading it. Not because they were told to, but because it made sense. Ava had staggered the morning openers so that no one burned out on the early shift more than twice a week. She implemented a 2-person closing buddy system. No more single employees stuck, cleaning the floor alone after hours. There was a new break timer near the fridge. Everyone got one. No exceptions. No guilt. Theo, once a ghost in the background, now volunteered to train new hires on inventory intake. He even suggested organizing the dry stock shelf by expiration date, a small detail, but one no one had cared about before. Even Taryn, still rough around the edges, asked Ava if she could take point on setting up the seasonal drink board. "I used to do the chalk menus at my last shop," she muttered. "Might as well not let that go to waste." "Do it," Ava replied with a nod. "Make it yours." By Friday, customers were noticing. A regular named Diane brought in her therapy dog and actually stayed to sip her drink instead of grabbing it and rushing out. Another guest, Mr. Pritchard, who'd once written a 1-star review about being ignored at the pickup counter, left a tip and told Ava, "Place feels different lately. Better." Grant stood by the window that afternoon watching it all unfold. He wasn't the center of it anymore. He didn't need to be. He caught Ava reviewing the new temperature log sheet, a pen tucked behind one ear. She was cross-checking entries, making notes, following up without micromanaging. He walked over. "Anything we missed?" he asked. She tapped the sheet. "Weekends. If we don't tighten lunch coverage between noon and 2, we'll fall behind on peak volume. We should rotate staggered breaks every 30 minutes instead of hourly." Grant nodded. "Good catch." A beat passed. She looked at him. "So, this is permanent? All of it?" "As long as it works," he said. "But culture isn't something we install. It's something we protect." She nodded slowly. "Then we start protecting it now." For the first time, there was no trace of doubt in her voice. Only resolve. Not long ago, Ava had been invisible. Another overworked part-timer in a broken system. Now she was walking the floor with authority, fielding questions, redirecting bad habits, setting the tone. The cafe wasn't just operating again. It was learning how to breathe. The sun was just beginning to set when Grant locked the front door of Store 4 for the night. Outside, the sidewalk was quiet. Inside, the cafe was spotless. Counters gleamed. Floors shined. The espresso grinder hummed in perfect calibration. But it wasn't the equipment that made the difference. It was the people still inside. Ava stood at the register, checking the end-of-day till with practiced focus. Taryn wiped down the back bar, humming softly to herself. Theo was folding up, the closing checklist already asking if he could help open tomorrow. Grant held the keys in his hand for a moment, then turned to Ava. "You're opening in the morning," he said, holding them out. She blinked. "Me? You've got this." She reached out and took the keys slowly, as if the weight of them meant more than access to a building. And it did. It meant trust, not given blindly, earned, proven, day after day. Grant stepped back, slinging his coat over one shoulder. "If anything feels off," he said, "call me. Anything." "I will," she replied, then added with a quiet smirk, "But I probably won't need to." He smiled. "I'm counting on that." As he walked toward the door, she stayed behind the counter, looking out across the space they had rebuilt. Not with marketing slogans or new uniforms, but with patience, structure, and earned respect. From the other side of the glass, Grant glanced back one last time. Ava was still there, still watching. Not nervously, not out of fear, but with the steady presence of someone who had survived the worst version of a place and stayed to make it better. Grant thought of something his father once told him at the original cafe back when everything was simpler. "Trust is built from the counter up, son, not from the office down." He had forgotten that somewhere along the way. But now, thanks to a girl who once apologized for handing off a latte too slowly, he remembered. The next morning, customers lined up once more outside Store 4. They weren't met with excuses or eye rolls. They were met with service, with pride, with something real. And for the first time in a long time, the cafe wasn't just open, it was alive. She didn't ask for the spotlight, but when everything crumbled, she stepped forward and helped rebuild a broken system from the ground up, because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who saves it. If this story hit you hard, if you believe leadership starts with listening, then don't just scroll past. Drop a comment. Subscribe for more real stories that twist, inspire, and leave a mark, because we're just getting started.